Hello and welcome to our second guide for the Crimson Court Vampires. Today we're going to be working on, I don't know, Alfredo. I don't know the name of these guys. But this dude, which I have already base coated like I did for the previous guy. And we're going to go through all the details, and as we go through them, I'll explain how I base coated them, so you know all the colors and things. And let's get to work. So let's start from the armor, because it is the biggest detail after the cape. And the way I base coated it was by using ocean blue from AK mixed with a lot of black from Chimera. It's here, you can see it. It's a very, 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 very dark mix, but I needed to work up my highlights. So first off, let's add some sky blue to this mix to and shape up the non-metallic. So since we want the armor to be very dark, our job right now is to just define it before we even work on placing highlights on the volumes. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be adding this sky blue to our original base coat, creating basically a gray-blue color. And I'm going to be using this color to interpret the planes of light. And by that, I mean I am going to be highlighting the upper part of all of the planes of light. For example, here the armor is making a bit of a bump, and I'm highlighting it, right? Or here, just to get a bit of definition out of the planes, to separate them and allow myself to work on them more freely later on. As we established, this armor will need to be fairly dark. It doesn't really matter if it's not black. I don't care. It can be a very dark blue as well. So we're a bit more free with the colors. But I do want it to be dark. So I'm just highlighting that plane there. And then of course the edges as well. So all of these little edges here that are in the armor, we need to pick them out. It doesn't matter if I don't pick them out perfectly. I can always clean up later, but I do need them to have them placed for now. Let me thin the paint a little bit more so it flows a little bit more easily. Okay, so this very rough sketch is basically the way GW would do black armors. You know, if you watch Space Marines or stuff like that, you will see that they tend to have these way of highlighting. Of course, they do it cleaner, and if I wanted, I could, but I'm not interested in that. But this is the GW route in a way, edge highlighting a very dark base coat and calling it a day. Now, we are more interested in a more realistic effect and, of course, a non-metallic as well. So we're going to go over this. But this helps define the various volumes so we can see every plane every panel and start making our mind on what to do with this paint job. This is very helpful because it basically defines the area of work in a more practical way. So we aren't lost in the details, but we see everything at once. So with this, we can now start working on the highlights. Now, I'm imagining the light to come slightly from the left, from where he's looking at. So based on that, we're going to build up our lights. So I'm going to be thinning this paint quite a bit. Not too much, but enough so that it flows nicely off of the brush. And I'm going to start sketching some highlight following the volumes. So, for example, the arm here, this is a cylinder. So I'm going to be having a couple of highlights going through the length of it, like this. The objective is to keep the highlights small, so that the darkness of the armor still shines through and makes it look very dark. Some of our highlights are forced by the sculpt. For example, there is a very strong pyramidal shape being created here. So we need to portray it accordingly. You see how I have these long highlights going through the whole length of the leg. Once refined, it will look pretty good. But again, the objective is to keep these lights very small so the black wins over the other colors. Okay, with this stage done, all we gotta do is create a mix of the two color. So the original base coat, very, very dark base coat, and this highlight. I went very light very quickly, so it's gonna be slightly more difficult than usual to blend these two colors together because of how much of a difference in value there is. So if you find you're having a hard time blending colors, try reducing the contrast between them and build it up more slowly. I'm gonna attempt to blend this as it is, and if needed, I'm gonna glaze over the highlights to reduce them in brightness so I can blend them more easily. But what I'm gonna be doing is placing these in between color exactly in between. So wherever I feel like there should be a gradient, I'm just gonna be placing the color there. Now what I'm doing is I am basically glazing these in-between tone over my lights because it feels like it's gonna be almost impossible to blend properly with these two colors because the difference is too high between them. So I am toning down the lights, pushing them down a little bit in value by glazing these slightly darker color on top. And this is gonna give me an easier time blending in just a second when we go back to the base coat and glaze it back on. Okay, we can go back to our original base coat and use it to glaze more of a blend, basically re-pushing the shadows. Okay, we can start adding more. Now that we have like a grayish base, it's going to be easier to highlight. So we can go a little bit lighter. I'm going to be adding a bit of sky blue to the mix. And we're going to be highlighting one more time inside of the arrow. Again, keeping the highlights small. Don't forget about the planes of light. We have a light at the very beginning. As we go lighter, we need to make those lighter as well. Okay, we can now thin this paint quite a bit. Basically glazing consistency. And we can direct this paint, the very same highlight, we can direct it towards the lights we have already painted for blending. Always clean the brush on a paper towel before you take it to the model. You can see that it's taking forever to do this, but I hope that by the end of it all, it's gonna be worth it. It is all about just creating in between tones, creating and placing them in such a way that you occupy the least amount of space possible with these colors, while at the same time pushing the contrast as much as you can, which by default means going back and forth quite a lot because you have to push the light, make it smaller, push the light, make it smaller, push the light, make it smaller. So like you're gonna go back and forth quite a bit between colors. So when preparing your mixes, have a lot of paint available because you're gonna have to go through a lot. Like it's very difficult to slowly work up from shadow to light in one go because you are bound to make your lights a little bit too big or your blends won't be as good, so you have to reshape things a little bit more so that they work. And this is what it's all about, really. It's all about that. It's all about getting that gradient as small as you can, maintaining as much black as possible visible on the model while pushing lights. And of course, getting a clean paint job as well, because it is very easy to push the lights if you absolutely don't care about getting a gradient. But if you do want a gradient, you're gonna have to work very hard for it, because since you don't have space to work with, you're bound to have to really, really take your time and work with the tip of the brush around the model, cleaning up all little problems. But I am satisfied for now with this. So we're gonna make it one more time lighter. I'm gonna be using Ice Yellow from AK. And I'm gonna be thinning it a little bit so that it flows off of the brush. And we're gonna be focusing this light mostly in the area where the light is coming from. As we said, it's coming from our left. So we're going to sharpen the highlight one more time. Keeping, of course, the light as small as we can. Okay. I think this concludes our armor painting. There are a few things I have to do to clean it up. Black lining, for example, and stuff like that. But overall, I think that this gives you an idea. We've been painting this for quite a while now. This gives you an idea of the armor itself, so we can move on to another detail. Maybe let's paint the reds. Yeah, let's paint the reds. All right, let's get to work on the reds. Now, we base coated the reds using burnt red from AK, amazing color, I love it. And we're now going to start highlighting using Chimera Red, Cartacci Red though. It's from the newest set. This red is so good, so good. If you can get it, it's so good. You will see soon. So yeah, I'm going to be using Cartacci Red. I'm not going to be using it in its purity because I want to use it in its purity as an highlight. So you will see soon. In order to maintain the color very vivid red, because these guys are vampires, so I want the red to be strong, I'm gonna be playing around with the colors in a way that doesn't take me to using orange or yellow or pink to highlight, but instead red is gonna be the strongest highlight. Starting from this red burnt red, we can go darker a little bit. Just immediately, just shade a little bit, just to give ourselves an idea. So we can add some black to it, so to our original red, and we can paint this shadow towards the bottom of the cape, like so. We can of course avoid painting it on the ridges because light is gonna hit there, but here, for example, we can have a bit of a light. Sorry, a bit of a shadow. And the same, of course, goes for our loincloth. See, we're building up the shadow by gently glazing the color. It's not really a glaze, it's more like a layer, but it's a thin layer. My brush is almost empty. I have very little paint on it. There we go. We can always... It's a bit of a mixed color to get ourselves more of a blend. Okay, so with our Cartacci red, we can thin it. And we're going to be placing it as an highlight. So whatever we feel light should be, which in this case is dictated by the sculpt, to be the ridges here, for example. Okay, and now very simply, we can thin this color a lot more. Clean the brush on a paper towel, as always. And then gently drag the paint towards the highlight. So the highlight we have already placed. We're gonna just drag the pigment towards it. And doing this will create a blend as well as reinforcing the highlight, making it even more opaque and strong. See, it's very simple, but it works. It looks very vampirical. It's a very intense red. It's a very, very intense red, and it looks beautiful in my opinion. And it took no time to do. What matters is that you place your highlight thinly, both the paint and the size, because as you work on the blending, you're going to be extending the highlight a little bit because of the glazing you're going to be doing. And use the side of the brush as you glaze. Don't use the tip like this. Use the side. This allows you to avoid creating brush strokes in the glazing, which will then ruin the blend. So always use the side when you're blending. And then just work as much as you want in refining and cleaning up the blend. It's a very intense red. And the same, of course, goes for the front. So with thin paint, I'm just going to gently drag the pigment towards the highlight so that the highlight is reinforced by the pigmentation as well as blended. See, this is a good way to show you that you don't always have to add white or a light color to highlight. You can always start from a much darker base and build up into a very vibrant, colorful light, which is gonna give more of a vibrant sense to it. Of course, if you're working on a non-metallic red, doing it like this is going to be a little bit harder because it's not going to have enough light in it to fight against the rest of the model, because the point of non-metallic is that it is the brightest part of the composition. As you can see, we went very light with our non-metallics here. We can't make this cape look non-metallic by using these colors. We would have to go into pink and white. But for a matte object, such as a cloth, it works perfectly to be working on with colors like this without going into whites or light colors. We can just use very progressively more saturated colors, and that's going to create a very beautiful sense of light and color, because this isn't actually a light. Truth be told, what this color is, this very strong red, is actually the mid-tone. But we are suggesting, by painting it like this, that there isn't enough light to really make this cloth illuminated. So what we see as the strongest light is the mid-tone of the object, because we are in an environment where light isn't really hitting it too hard, or the material itself isn't really reflective. And cloth usually isn't very reflective. Like my shirt isn't pure white, right? Although I have 3 lights hitting me at this moment, my head is white, my forehead is, because skin tone is very reflective, my hairs have white highlight, even my glasses do, but my shirt stops at a light brown. And I have 3 lights very close to me. Imagine what would happen to my shirt if I was just under the sun. I wouldn't be this light, and the same applies to this cape. It's a cape. It doesn't have to be super incredibly bright. It can just be colorful, and that's enough. Like we have here. I like it a lot. All right. Let's get this. We don't have much left to do. We have the skin tone, the horns, the goals, and then the weapon, and then we're done. So let's do that. We started the skin tone with the same color we started with for the other guy, warm gray from AK, plus olive green from AK, and a bit of black. This is our mid-tone. Now, to highlight it, I'm gonna be adding a touch of... I can remix it first for you guys to see. Warm gray from AK, black, if I can pick it up, black, and olive green. There we go. So we can highlight it by adding a touch of sky blue to it, a Vallejo sky blue. This would be our highlight, our mid-tone really. I have red on the brush and it has made a mess, okay? So this will be our mid-tone, and we can paint this color in pretty much everywhere on the head, except the darkest recesses. And we can make it lighter once more, adding ice yellow. Painting it on the forehead. Sorry, on the eyebrows, on the nose, the upper part of the mouth, the cheekbones. We can play around with the blueness of our lights a little bit more. For example, I feel like my first highlight was a bit too gray. So I'm gonna be bluing it out a little bit more by having more sky blue in the mix. We can have a bit more ice yellow added to it. And do our final highlight. Let me thin it a little bit more. Okay. Okay, so with our lighter, we can go with pure ice yellow actually, just to get that contrast in there. And I'm gonna be picking out the area of the forehead a bit more, as well as the top of the nose, although this nose is very flat. So we sort of want to edge highlight it a little bit. Okay. Now we find ourselves with an interesting contrast, chromatic contrast between the cold gray greens, the blue gray greens, the blue grays, and the yellow grays now. So all we're gonna do is make sure that these colors sort of blend into each other a bit more, and then we can work on glazing our purple to give some tonality to the skin. So what I'm going to be doing now is going to be working on, now that I have lit up the face properly, I can push the lights a bit more on the neck area as well. And we can also highlight a little bit the abs, although we don't really need to do much here because these ab area will be almost entirely covered by the weapon. Okay. Okay, I'm fairly happy with this. We can pick up AK Purple. Actually, no. Let me use AK Deep Purple. It's a bit of a more vibrant purple. And we're gonna be darkening this color just a little bit, adding some black to it. And then thinning it into glaze consistency. As always, check on your thumb if you are unsure about the consistency. It needs to barely have any effect on your skin tone. And then I'm going to be painting this color into the recesses a bit more to push the contrast, as well as to have a bit more of a color present on this model. So we end up having a skin tone that, even though it's very small and simple, really, we can have a lot of colors present in it. And we can exaggerate the color just a little bit, since we're working on a vampire anyway. Nobody will care much about it. And we always have to keep in mind that we can always go back to the mid-tone and glaze it, or layer it on top of our purple here to subdue it and make it a bit more hard to see. Like, for example, now it's a very strong effect, so I'm gonna go back to the mid-tone, and I'm gonna be gently placing it so that it blends a little bit more. Okay. We can also use our red, the burnt red, again, into basically layer consistency and paint it into the eyes. And then our Cartacci red to paint the eyes themselves. So we painted the area around the eyes in this red to make it look like bloodshot in a way. Or if you want, it can also double as an OSL from the eyes. And then all we're gonna do, I'm gonna be adding a little bit of ice yellow to this red so that it covers, and then I'm gonna glaze over the red again. I actually don't mind this pink, so I'm probably gonna keep it. Yeah, I'm probably gonna keep it. Just gonna glaze the area around it. There we go. Okay. We can paint the mouth with this dark purple. And we can paint the teeth with basically ice yellow. Okay. Okay. Let's do the gold. The gold was base coated with a mix of English uniform from Vallejo, English uniform plus a bit of black, plus a bit of burnt red, This is somewhat the base coat, although it's darker. Something like this, but darker, with a bit more black. I'm not darkening it to show you the color. But for our highlights, I'm just gonna straight up go into English uniform, and we're gonna sketch in our lights onto these gold. Keeping the highlights fairly small. I want the gold to look a bit of an antique gold. Okay, we can go back to our original base coat, and if needed, glaze it on to smooth out the transition. And then with cold yellow from Chimera, we can concoct a very strong, vibrant highlight. That's bad. Well, we have enough paint. Why does this always happen? Anyway, we can add a bit of ice yellow to this cold yellow. And we can use this color to do one more highlight. So we picked out the edges here, and then we can highlight on the inside a bit more. This is a very strong yellow. We're not going to keep it in its purity on the model. We're going to glaze over it to tone it down, but we're going to be using it as a placeholder for our light. For now, we're just going to be blending it by mixing these yellow with the previous English uniform. And we can now glaze pure English uniform with a little bit of red added to it, just to make it a little bit warmer. We can glaze this over our lights, tone them down a little bit, make them feel a little bit more realistic, because that yellow was a bit too canary yellow. It was very useful to have for vibrance, but we don't need it at the very end. We just needed it in progress, so to speak, to build up our lights. Okay. With this done, we can use the same Agile light mixture we just used to do the edges onto the little symbol at the bottom here. We can always clean up, of course, going back to the original base coat color and cleaning our edges if needed. Agile lighting does not have to be a one-to-one trick. You can always clean it up later on. Okay. I'm not sure about this gold. I mean, it is cartoony, which somewhat fits the models, but I don't know. I'm just gonna try to work a bit more on the blending, try to see if I can refine it through the blending and make it look more interesting. Okay. Now let's do the bone. The bone was base coated with warm gray. That's it. Just warm gray. And from a K, of course. And what we need to work on now is making it look darker towards the beginning of it. So we can use the very same base coat color for our gold as a shadow for this bone. And we can gently layer it down, making the base darker. And we can, of course, wet blend it. Sorry. All right, so after wet blending a bit more, we can do our glazing by thinning the paint quite a bit, cleaning the brush on a paper towel, that's very important, and gently moving the paint towards the base of the bone. As always, since it's glazing, it's not going to have much of an effect the first few times we do it, but the more we do it, the more it's going to cover. So we're just gonna keep going, let it dry between layer, and do it again. If we find that it's not going to dry very nicely, we can always quickly lick the brush and use the even more thinned paint to spread out the line we have created through the technique called feathering. We can add a bit of black to this because I do want the base of the horn to be fairly dark. And we can thin it even more, of course. Work our glaze in there. Make sure that it's dried before you apply any more layers on top, otherwise all of the layers are going to come off and it's going to look awful and very difficult to fix too. So patience, it's not my greatest quality, but I am trying to be patient, so you should too. Okay, and with pure black this time, we can do one more glaze. Cleaning the brush on a paper towel. Trying to really, really darken this brown. Okay. Now, we need to highlight the bone to look like it's reflecting light, because bones are a bit of a glossy material, right? You can get away with it by just doing a satin varnish if you want on these bones, and they're gonna reflect light. But if you do want to paint the actual effect yourself, what I'm gonna be doing is get the warm brown, sorry, the warm gray, add a little bit of icy yellow to it, thin it quite a lot, and very gently build up a light. Which is never really gonna be blended fully, but as long as the paint is thin, the light is gonna look more like a glossiness on the bone and not like a layer of paint. And we can go even lighter and do it all over again inside of the area of these. Okay. We can glaze our brown on top to blend it in a bit more, and then re-highlight if we want to. We can take as many steps as we want here to make sure that we get the best effect that we want. So I'm going to be glazing the brown on top, and it's going to be turning my light more brownish and therefore blend it just a little bit more. And while that dries, we can use ice yellow to continue the light on the normal color, on the gray. I went a bit too wide there, but I can always clean it up. Okay. One more glaze of brown. And we can also use black a bit more to define the volume. So not only is the bone changing color, it also has a volume of its own, so that needs to be portrayed properly as well. So these this upper part is going to be lighter, but the bottom part is going to be darker. So we need to do that. Okay. The gold needs some cleanup, but that's not a big deal. Okay, so with this done, we can move on to the weapon. So give me a second to get the weapon primed and ready to go on our little model. We'll be back. Okay, so we're back with the arms assembled. I have base coated the skin tone in the same way I did the face, and the weapon was base coated with the same very dark blue color that we used for the armor. So let's get the skin sorted out real quickly. I'm just going to be highlighting it again using sky blue and placing the highlight color accordingly. Of course, we can always go back to the base coat color if needed to blend. And then with ice yellow to highlight one more time. Not quite as bright as the face, but bright enough so that our volumes are interpreted. Okay, with the skin tone sorted out, we are left with the weapon. There is a bit of an injection mark that I have not cleaned up here. So for the weapon, I would like to keep it fairly dark. So I'm gonna be mixing myself a gray by using ice yellow. Actually, sky blue and black. With these colors, we can get a gray. And I'm gonna be painting it on the cutting edges of the weapon. So I'm gonna be ignoring the body and instead just painting the cutting edges with it. Then we can add ice yellow to our light. And we can clean up going back to the base coat color. We can also make the original base coat slightly lighter using light blue, sky blue, sorry. And very, very gently, not much, but gently highlight the body of the weapon. Okay, to make the cutting edges even more shiny and dark, we can go with pure ice yellow. With that done, all we gotta do is just push up the lights onto the body of the weapon. I'm gonna be using the highlight we had used for the black. Sorry, I got a dog not long ago, and she's going through puberty. Anyway, with our lighter gray blue, we can paint our lights on the weapon body. Okay, and of course also the tip up here. Okay, we can go a little bit lighter with ice yellow added to the mix. And we can pick the very edges of the weapon. Okay. I think I'm happy with this. All that is left to do is the base and a few details, clean up the back, the paint the non-metallic here in the back. But I think that for this guide we can call it done. I hope you have enjoyed it. I hope you've learned something from it, and I will see you in the next one when we finally start working on the most interesting characters out of these set. So yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. Have a fantastic day.